Hello and welcome to my follow-up review of the Mode1 Retro II Android mobile flip phone. If you haven't already seen my earlier video, this will be a commentary of the experience of having now used the phone for over a month. So without further ado, here we go. Firstly, I have thoroughly enjoyed using this phone and returning to the old T9 keyboard. It has been both a fun but practical method of inputting text. Straight out of the box, the input was a little bit clunky, as it's not designed primarily for the English market. It does allow for the individual character input, but for the original T9 experience, you will benefit from downloading an app that allows for that. And a good one that I've found, and I've noticed many other people using for similar devices such as this, is simply called Old T9. Once downloading it, everything was up and running without too much hassle. It was pretty quick, pretty easy. And even though there is a free version of the software, there is a paid version which does allow for a few extra customizations to the function and layout of the keyboard. So to give a quick look at old T9 keyboard, we can see here, not a whole lot to do really. It's pretty simple. Choose to have the sound of the key press on or off, or the volume of which. Haptic feedback, so a vibration upon pressing the keys. And you can choose to hide the digital version of the keyboard, which would normally be displayed on the screen due to the fact that most phones don't have a hardware keyboard. So you can have use the T9 keyboard on solely touchscreen devices, but in this case we have the physical keyboard, so it allows you to actually disable what would be the taking up half of the screen of a virtual keyboard, which we don't need, so it's nice that you can hide that. And even though there is a portion of the keyboard that remains, such as special characters, emojis, and some shortcuts and such, you can also control the size of that through keyboard height adjustment and width, another adjustment you can make. Some alignment settings, again, you can tweak it, but generally typical sort of default settings are generally pretty good. Other standard sort of settings, double space, full stop, space after word. There are options for hints, which I've never found necessary. It's fairly intuitive, so that shouldn't really be any, not even sure what that would show. So for the most part, I'm just going to ignore that. Auto capitalization, auto close emoji. So when you do open the emoji portion of the virtual keyboard, you can either have it stay open, so you can select multiple emojis within a series of inputs, or you can just have it, as I think most people would typically only ever send one, so you press it and then it will go back to the default setting before that, the default view I should say. A number of languages that it offers. For myself, it would have been nice to have had Japanese as well, as I am dabbling with that language, but at the very least it does have English. For Japanese, you've always got your standard Google or whatever variation of virtual keyboard you like to use for that particular means of input. So as you can see here, this is all the space that it takes up on the screen, which is rather minimal. Symbols, emojis, and you've got T9 single character input or numbers. So depending on where that is at the time, what you are pressing on here, for example, or we can change that, and you can change it by pressing the pound key, or hash. So that goes to single character input. Press it again, or again, touching it on screen, brings up the numbers. So it's reasonably efficient. It's really not any great drama at all. Using a physical keyboard, it's actually been very enjoyable. I genuinely have really had a lot of fun using it again after so many years. So that's that. And if you do pay for the premium version, it provides some extra keyboard designs, which, even though I've paid for the premium version, honestly, I think the one I preferred was either the default one, which is up here, or where's the one I did choose? Maybe that is what I'm on. Possibly that one there. I don't recall. But I think that one's the slightly rounder buttons. In any case, it works fine. It's really good. So regarding the buttons of the phone, they initially did feel kind of slightly slippery. Not bad, but due to the fact that they are quite shallow, they don't really have ridges on them, so it's a little tricky to blindly type, especially in the beginning, until you familiarize yourself with where things are. And then at that point, the 5 key does have a tiny little nipple on it, which you can feel, so at least from that point you can sort of know where you are. And once you familiarize yourself with where each of the buttons are, your shortcuts and such, it's really quite easy to use. And once I got comfortable, I was punching out whole strings of text, barely any slower than what it would be on a touch screen. But something I wasn't really expecting, that was a nice discovery, was that given that there is so much auto-correction, auto-dictionary with all of our typical smartphones these days, with all the virtual keyboards, you can sort of smash in any spelling, however wrong, and for the most part it picks up what you're trying to spell and it corrects it and allows you to continue. And we probably don't realize it, but we've become rather lazy in that you probably don't know, but your spelling's probably getting worse because of this. So even though we do have shortcuts for words that you can choose from based on the characters you've pressed, there are often different options of the configured characters that will create a word. So with the T9 keyboard, what is actually BBC, or is it CAB? Is it CCC, CAA? So many options of words that you could be trying to spell based on simply pressing the letter 2 3 times. And with this, even though it's giving you options for the characters you've pressed and what the word could be based purely on those character presses, it's not necessarily correcting your spelling. So if I wanted cab, but I did C232, it's not going to give me the option for cab because I haven't provided the potential for that word, for that spelling. So what I actually found is that a number of times I actually had to stop and question the word I'm trying to spell, because I'd smash something in and it wasn't coming up. And normally that would be fine on the virtual keyboards that Android and iPhones typically offer, as it would recognize that you're close enough and fix it. But with this, you actually have to stop and think and maybe go back a character or two and provide it a character that would be in a position for that word, for it to continue spelling that word. So I might be rambling slightly on that, but I'm saying that as a positive, in that I found that it slightly causes you to pause and actually think a little bit with what you're typing. So in doing that, just overall, you're considering a little more the words you are using. It's very easy to just lazily smash out something on the virtual keyboard. But by doing it this way, because you're focused a little more not just on the spelling, there's some sort of the tactility of it makes a connection, I believe, somehow, that makes what you're writing a little more significant. So I think that is a good thing. So as mentioned, we've got our 4 shortcut buttons on the top of the phone here, as well as menu, phone book, recent calls, OK button, and this also acts as your up, down, left, right. Directional buttons, you've got your Android function buttons here. Answer, reject, and this is clear, delete. So if you're in a word, you press that to delete a character. And then of course you've got your numbers and characters down here. You know, again, it didn't take long to set up these and familiarize yourself with what the shortcuts were. And it's easy simply by holding it. You then select which app you want to assign to that command. So once you've set it up, there's my maps. Press it again, there's a camera. Press it again, there's another app, calculator. So it's very cool actually. Rather than having your screen cluttered with everything, you can actually have the more common apps you'd need literally a button press away. Another thing that I found pleasing about the hardware keyboard, again, I don't know what it is, but it's just more fun. It's just nicer to be pressing keys as opposed to just tapping, you know, what feels sort of soullessly on a slab of glass like every other phone is these days. So whether this phone or any other phone that has some sort of a hardware keyboard, you'd be surprised whether you've used them in the past or it's something you're just curious about. Give it a go. You might find that you really enjoy it. And as I spoke about earlier, there's some sort of a connection, at least with me, whether I'm willing it on or there actually is something that I'm noticing. It just makes the whole experience more pleasant using the phone. So something to consider. And also the other obvious nice throwback to a phone like this is the nostalgic appeal to those of us that are old enough to have used the old Nokias, Ericssons, Samsungs, LGs, whatever you used back in the days where phones, be them flip, candy bars as they called them for the ones that were non-flip. You know, they were fond memories of a time where things were simpler, but at the time it felt very futuristic with the features we did have. And this was before we even had coloured screens or even cameras. So yeah, very different, but it's a nice little trip down memory lane. And by the way, Ericsson, even though you haven't made a phone in forever, if there's ever a chance, I would love a modern reissue of the T28. I had that phone. It was, it felt like a piece of space tech at the time when it first came out. It was incredible. The neon green glow of that screen, even though miniature by today's standards, even back in the day it was a fairly small phone. There was just something so enjoyable about it. The sound that came from its very basic speaker, it is so iconic to what that device was. But anyway, Ericsson, you were fun. And while we're at it, P900, Sony Ericsson, was also a very lovely phone. My first touch screen phone, if I recall, and a rather feature-packed one at that. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. Holding the phone is not awkward or uncomfortable at all. It's a perfectly acceptable size, balance, the weight. In fact, I wouldn't complain or even be against the idea of a future model being even slightly larger or more substantial in weight and size, if that meant a slight increase in the battery. I don't think you can ever have enough battery. Not that this is horrible in that department, but I'll touch on that in a moment. Taking calls on the Retro 2 has been as you'd probably expect. Having the physical buttons to answer or reject the calls is once again a fun touch. By default, closing the phone does end a call, just like they would have back in the day. Snapping the phone closed was a fun way to hang up on somebody. But if you prefer not to have that happen, you can disable that in the settings. So you can simply close it and keep an active call. But I can't imagine too many scenarios you would need to do that, but it's up to you. You have that choice. During a call, the speaker quality and volume is acceptable. Whilst driving in my car and on the speakerphone, or in noisier environments and talking with the phone up to my ear, such as, say, a busy pub, I did notice that it could have been advantageous to have a bit of extra volume in those scenarios. In the car particularly, if I had the phone cradled on speakerphone, so not going through Bluetooth, it was a little challenging to hear at times. But again, most people these days, I think you're probably going to be Bluetoothed, so it's probably not that much of a drama in the car. And my car also is a bit older, so it's a bit more road noise. And again, in noisier environments, as you probably would anyway, you step out from where it's noisy into a quiet corridor and take your call there, which is probably favourable to the person on the other side of the phone call. Also, regarding the physicality of the phone, as in how it physically handles to hold it, to use it, for years now, I've not been able to use a phone without a case. And it's not just entirely all because of the protection that it provides, but with so many modern phones, I feel that a case, if nothing else, even before the protection, it just brings it back to a more manageable size that's actually comfortable to hold. A modern slab phone these days, a typical touchscreen phone, your Galaxies, your iPhones, they are so thin and you feel like you're holding something so awkward and fragile, and they're always slippery. So to prop it up anywhere, if you're trying to watch a video while you're cooking or wherever you are, it's almost guaranteed to slip down, fall over and break. So it's nice to have a phone that's not so obsessed with thinness. In saying that, it's not a large device, nor is it heavy. Perfect for what it is. So no complaints there. It's actually been very nice, its size. Never felt like corners were digging in like some phones do. Yeah, I really can't think of any problem I ever had while holding the phone. So the size of the Retro 2 and the accompanying screen, and the features and everything it offers, it's all a nice package. Certainly having come from a Samsung Galaxy Ultra, which is a very large phone by comparison, the I think roughly 3.5 inch screen that's on the Retro 2 is initially definitely noticeably small, but after a day or two, at no stage do you feel like you're hampered by it. Yes, the resolution is a little bit different to the phone I had, but you probably wouldn't want that resolution on a small screen like this, so you don't quite have the real estate to have full, I don't know, let's say if you're into spreadsheets or full passages of text, entire websites, you might be scrolling a little bit more rather than showing so much on the screen at once. But again, kind of goes with it. You wouldn't really expect it to be any different to that. You wouldn't want to squeeze more into a small screen, but even though it is what it is, again, at no stage did I feel like it was harder work to use it, to view what it was I needed to view at the time. It was perfectly serviceable for what I wanted from it to do. So the overall size and weight is actually a refreshing step down from most modern phones, I personally believe. in my experience I've had over the last month or so. Despite larger screens being a believed requirement for most users these days, it doesn't take long before you adjust to the more compact size of the Retro 2, which rather quickly actually becomes an appreciated benefit. In fact, it's an interesting reminder of the days from when, believe it or not, a smaller phone was all the rage. Absolutely adored my Nokia 8210 way back when, which when handling one recently quickly reminds you of just how, not just small, but tiny phones were back in the day. Probably, I dare say, about the size of this phone just there. You had your little screen, buttons all in there. But that was the rage, and phones still got even smaller than that again. So I think this is a sort of perfect balance of the good old days and modern phones, what we need and want from them, and a blend of those two times and what this ends up being. I think it's really a great package. For a typical day's use, the battery capacity of the Retro 2 is perfectly acceptable. I could easily get through a standard day without any great hassle. The biggest drain, however, from my personal experience was when using GPS maps whilst driving. A couple of hours spent using the GPS in the car starts to consume a noticeable amount of battery, which I'd probably estimate to be around, give or take, 15% per hour. But as most people these days are charging their phone while they're driving, this wouldn't be an issue. So this is really only if, for whatever reason, you're driving a vehicle where the phone isn't being charged. So in many cases, it's actually a non-issue. For all other purposes, using the phone for calls, some web browsing, a couple of videos, whatever you do throughout a standard day, I never ran out of battery. So all good on that front. As I'll begin to round out this follow-up review, I can honestly say that the more time spent with the phone and becoming acquainted with its unique set of features, which some might incorrectly argue as being drawbacks, very quickly start to make sense. At least to me and my personal reasons for why I chose to make this my primary device. It has been capable of every task that I have thrown at it. Work functions, social media, watching YouTube videos, anything, listening to music through Bluetooth, podcasts, all those things. It does everything. It is Android. So I have not encountered a single application that would not either run or wouldn't perform in a fashion that I needed it to. Everything worked. There might be one or two things where you need to adjust how you use it, but even that I don't recall ever really doing. So it's been perfectly fine on that front. The quickest way to summarize this follow-up review would be to say that the Mode 1 Retro 2 is perfectly capable of accomplishing every task I need and want from it, but it's just imperfect enough to encourage me to use more specialized devices for more involved work. This was my hope from the very beginning, which I'm very pleased to say has been successfully delivered, with one very unfortunate deal-breaking issue that I did encounter numerous times. So yes, we're taking a little bit of a turn here, which I don't think is the end of the world, so hear me out. I don't know if it was my particular network provider, the specific service in my area, a conflicting app I had installed, perhaps it may have been my older SIM card that I was using in this, or as I suspect and hope is something that could be remedied with a simple software update, but on more than a few occasions I would lose network service. For reasons that I never fully understood, I would just totally lose connection to my 4G mobile network. Here in Australia, we don't have any networks below 4G, or at least they're wrapping up the tail end of whatever exists of 3G these days. So despite this phone supporting 4G, 3G and even 2G, we only have access to 4G. But for whatever reason, after losing signal, it would generally only return after restarting the phone. I didn't notice any particular pattern of behavior on my part that encouraged this, but seemingly randomly, despite having strong service moments earlier, and having not changed my location, really done anything different, maybe not even using the phone at the time, I would lose service and no longer be able to receive or send calls and text messages. Wi-Fi was still working, but the cellular mobile portion of communication would disappear. It would eventually return by itself if left for long enough, which, again, randomly, could have been anywhere from 10, 15, 25 minutes. I never really timed it. It sort of seemed sometimes it was quicker, other times it was longer. But more often than not, no amount of toggling flight mode on and off, as others have suggested for other Android devices, can be a fix for this thing happening. Seems to be a random thing that happens on some phones or networks. Again, I'm not sure what the combination is. But yeah, flight on and off. Some say do it 2 or 3 times, it'll come back. Whatever, I tried different things. But it would never result, that itself would not bring back the network. Only either waiting or restarting the phone. So not a reset, not a factory reset, just your standard restart of the phone. So whatever that 1 minute long process is for it to reboot. And then straight away, you've got your service again. I could maybe get through a day or so without any hassle at all, without losing the service. But then I might have had the day where I might have had to restart 2 or 3 times because of this problem. I did find something that helped somewhat with this problem though. So as you might notice, we look a little bit different here to standard Android, which is what I first showed in the original video. I'm not sure if this is a feature on all Android phones. I haven't even checked on my original Samsung. Perhaps I'll do that later. Or if it's just something unique and honestly quite cool to this phone. But there's an option that can be engaged in the settings menu called Simple Mode. So toggling that, it reboots the phone into what is basically some sort of a simplified graphical interface. In this mode, you still have all of your apps, all of your shortcuts, notifications, everything still exists and works the way it did, but it just makes it somewhat simpler to navigate physically from the buttons. And you can also do things through the touchscreen, but it's actually more efficient in this mode, I believe, whilst using the hardware keyboard. And again, you got all your apps, everything you ever need. And it's actually really cool to be able to use it that way. So I don't know why, but being in this mode actually seemed to improve that problem I was having. So the reason I bring this up, and for reasons that I don't entirely know why, but when in this simple mode, I experienced these dropouts significantly less. When I had previously sometimes experienced a loss of service numerous times throughout a single day in the full Android mode, I would sometimes go days without losing service at all in this simple mode. I think about 3 days I got, which was wonderful. And at that point I thought, all right, I fixed it. This is the solution. And I thought that was pretty cool because I actually was preferring the simple mode. It was a fun little way to get around. But unfortunately, it did happen to me again. I lost service, and it was at that point I sort of unfortunately resigned myself to the fact that this wasn't going to be reliable enough for me to use, as this is my only phone. I don't want to use multiple phones. So for work and for personal, this is it, and I can't afford to not be contactable, be it family member, friend, or work colleague, whatever it is, especially if it's at a time where I'm unaware of the fact that my phone isn't receiving network. So unfortunately, because of this, I've chosen to pause this experiment for now, which I'm a bit bummed out about, but I will be keeping it. and I'm hoping that either I figure out if I'm doing something wrong, or perhaps they might do a software update which might fix this. And as I mentioned, because it was behaving differently in the different modes of the interface, I'm wanting to believe that it is just some sort of software bug. So fingers crossed, see how we go. But one cool point I did notice, our local Costco, which has a double-decker car park, when using my earlier phone, the Galaxy Ultra, once I got in that car park, I would lose signal and basically not get anything until I left that place. But this phone surprised me in that actually the whole time I was in that car park, I had signal. I could make calls and such. So signal potential is actually very good. Just for whatever reason, if I dropped signal, or maybe it was passing between towers, again, I don't know what the specific combination of factors were that caused it to do what it did when it did. It seemed random, but it may not be random. I'm confident it's not the hardware, because the bands are supported at quite a number. Most of the bands of the 4G of the phone are available here in Australia. So that does play. When it's connected, it's great. For whatever reason though, there were times where I would lose it and it just wouldn't come back, or at least not straight away, which unfortunately was the deal breaker for me. So again, this was only my own personal experience. There are an assortment of potential reasons for why I may have experienced those problems. I'm not at all suggesting that anybody else will experience this same issue that I did, apart from this one, but admittedly critical issue. I really do love this Mode1 Retro 2, and I truly would love to see more devices like this become more widely available in the future. Not just in Japan, where this has come from, but I think a lot of people would really enjoy what a phone like this can offer people. For some, they may choose a phone like this because they think it's cute, different. Others may do it for nostalgic reasons. As for me, and as I suspect probably a lot of other people are doing, which seems to be a growing trend lately, more and more are looking to actually add a bit of breathing room into the ever-demanding, always connected world that we live in now. And I feel that a phone like this is perfect for those who still need or want a physical connection to all of those digital tentacles of our modern world, but done so in a way that allows you to not feel engulfed by it all. I'm not entirely sure of what the psychology is behind it, but despite still having all of the same connectivity as phones twice the size and 5 times more expensive as this Retro 2, I never felt that my phone demanded my attention like my earlier phone did. So again, I'm not quite sure what it is, but it was strangely liberating. So something to think about. But anyway, for anyone else who is interested in the Mode1 Retro 2, I would still highly recommend it. I just hope that the specific problem that I experienced was exclusive to me and my specific combination of whatever those potential factors were. So from here, I hope that these couple of videos that I have made regarding the Mode1 Retro 2 have been of assistance to your own curiosity surrounding this funky phone. For now, yes, I have already chosen a replacement alternative, which I should hope to receive in the next week or so. At which point I may do a review of that next phone, so please stay tuned for that, or whatever else it is that I may do next. Until then, have a great day, and thanks for watching.